Ladies and gentlemen, every challenge we experience, every setback, every unexpected turn, is not a sign that we are weak or unprepared. It is a reminder that our greatest instrument has always been and will always be our mind. When we learn to educate it, to train it with purpose and intention, we unlock the ability to overcome what once felt impossible. We often believe that circumstances shape who we are, but in truth, it is the way we interpret those circumstances that defines our path. Two people can face the same hardship. One feels defeated, the other sees a lesson. What separates them is not strength, luck, or intelligence. It is the way their mind has been taught to understand adversity. Education, at its core, is not about accumulating information. It is about learning to see the world clearly. When the mind is educated, it becomes strategic. It stops reacting in fear and starts responding with clarity. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" it begins to ask, "What can I learn from this?" That single shift turns obstacles into opportunities, but a powerful mind is not built overnight. It is shaped by daily decisions. What you read, what you listen to, the thoughts you choose to entertain, the people you surround yourself with. Discipline is not a punishment. It is the training ground for resilience. Each disciplined thought becomes a brick in the foundation of an unshakable inner world. When you understand your purpose, your personal reason for moving forward, your mind gains direction. Purpose acts like a compass. It gives meaning to struggle and value to perseverance. Without it, even small challenges can feel overwhelming. With it, even great challenges can be conquered. So educate your mind. Feed it ideas that strengthen you, not fears that limit you. Study not only to gain knowledge, but to build perspective. Learn not only to understand the world, but to understand yourself. Because when your mind is trained, disciplined, and aligned with purpose, there is truly nothing that can defeat you. You will not overcome everything because life becomes easy. You will overcome everything because you have become stronger. The mind is the most powerful instrument we possess, yet it is often the least intentionally trained. Many people move through life assuming that mental strength is something you either have or don't have, as if it were a natural talent rather than a cultivated skill. But in reality, the mind operates much like a strategic tool, one that becomes sharper, more efficient, and more capable when it is educated with purpose. Educating the mind is not confined to academic learning or the memorization of facts. It is the ongoing process of refining how we think, how we process challenges, and how we choose our responses. When we deliberately shape the way our mind interprets the world, we essentially train it to overcome any situation with clarity and confidence. A strategic mind begins with awareness. Awareness is the ability to observe your own thoughts rather than being controlled by them. People often react instantly to obstacles. Frustration, fear, and stress take over so quickly that they bypass rational thinking. An educated mind, however, creates space between the challenge and the reaction. It pauses, analyzes, and distinguishes between what is happening and how to respond. This separation is not accidental. It is the result of mental training. By practicing reflection, mindfulness, and critical thinking, the mind becomes capable of seeing a fuller picture instead of responding automatically to emotions. Awareness empowers you to choose responses that lead to progress rather than reactions that deepen the problem. A strategic mind also seeks understanding before judgment. When people jump to conclusions, they shut down possibilities. Educated thinking encourages curiosity, the willingness to ask questions, explore perspectives, and understand the root of a challenge. For example, when faced with failure, an untrained mind may immediately decide that it is not capable or that success is out of reach. A trained mind takes the same failure and analyzes it. What caused it? What needs to change? What can be learned? This habit transforms challenges from threats into data. By collecting information rather than reacting emotionally, the mind becomes a tool for problem solving instead of self-doubt. Another essential aspect of educating the mind is learning to identify unhelpful narratives. The human mind naturally creates stories about abilities, limitations, and expectations. Often, these stories are shaped by past experiences, cultural influences, or fear. Without training, these narratives act as invisible boundaries that dictate what we believe is possible. Educating the mind involves challenging these boundaries. It means questioning the accuracy of negative self-talk, recognizing the difference between temporary setbacks and personal limitations, and replacing fear-based assumptions with evidence-based understanding. When the mind learns to correct distorted narratives, it gains the ability to see opportunities that once felt unreachable. Educating the mind also includes teaching it to focus. In a world filled with distractions, notifications, opinions, pressures, and comparisons, focus has become a rare skill. A strategic mind knows how to filter out noise and concentrate on what truly matters. This kind of focus is not accidental. It is trained through disciplined habits such as planning, prioritizing, and staying committed to long-term goals even when short-term temptations arise. When the mind learns to direct its energy intentionally, it becomes significantly more resilient. Challenges no longer scatter attention or create overwhelm. Instead, the mind stays anchored to purpose and clarity. A trained mind understands that emotional regulation is not suppression but management. Emotions are real, valid, and important, but they are not meant to drive every decision. Educating the mind teaches it to acknowledge emotions without letting them dictate behavior. Instead of being overwhelmed by fear, frustration, or uncertainty, a trained mind learns to observe the emotion, understand its message, and then act based on values rather than impulses. This ability to regulate emotions builds stability during turmoil, confidence during doubt, and patience during pressure. A strategic mind also embraces adaptability. Life constantly changes. Unexpected events, shifting circumstances, and evolving goals are part of the human experience. An untrained mind sees change as a threat to comfort and control. An educated mind sees change as a challenge to engage with strategically. It adjusts its approach, updates its perspective, and remains flexible without losing its sense of direction. Adaptability strengthens resilience by ensuring that the mind can respond effectively to anything that arises. Ultimately, educating the mind means teaching it to transform challenges into catalysts. Every difficulty holds the potential for growth, but only a trained mind can extract that potential. By developing awareness, curiosity, focus, emotional intelligence, and adaptability, the mind evolves into a tool capable of navigating complexity with wisdom rather than fear. When the mind is strengthened in this way, it becomes the foundation for overcoming any obstacle, because success begins not with the challenge itself, but with the way the mind chooses to approach it. Purpose gives the mind direction in a way that no external motivation ever can. When people understand why they are pursuing a goal, enduring a challenge, or staying committed to a journey, their actions gain clarity and meaning. Without purpose, effort feels scattered and inconsistent. With purpose, even difficult situations become part of a meaningful path. Educating the mind to stay aligned with purpose is one of the most powerful ways to build resilience and overcome obstacles, because purpose transforms every experience into a guided step rather than a random struggle. A mind grounded in purpose interprets challenges differently. Instead of seeing difficulties as signals to stop, it views them as indicators that something valuable is worth pursuing. Purpose gives hardship a context. For someone without a clear sense of purpose, an obstacle feels like a dead end. But for someone with purpose, the same obstacle feels like a test that confirms the importance of moving forward. In this way, purpose becomes a filter that determines how the mind interprets adversity. The mind begins to recognize that challenges often accompany meaningful pursuits, and therefore it becomes less discouraged by setbacks. Purpose also shapes priorities. When people lack purpose, every task feels equally urgent or equally meaningless. They drift between projects, ideas, and responsibilities without a stable sense of what matters most. But when the mind is anchored in purpose, it becomes much easier to identify what to focus on and what to let go of. Purpose enables the mind to make decisions not based on pressure or distractions, but based on alignment. This alignment reduces mental conflict, builds consistency, and strengthens discipline. With purpose as a compass, the mind no longer wastes energy on pursuits that do not contribute to long-term fulfillment. Educating the mind to understand purpose involves deep self-reflection. Purpose is not something discovered in a single moment. It is clarified through questioning, learning, and observing one's own patterns. When the mind learns to ask questions such as what impact do I want to make, or what feels meaningful to me even when it is difficult, it begins to uncover the driving force behind actions. This process of internal learning builds self-awareness, which becomes a core element of mental strength. A mind that understands its purpose becomes harder to destabilize because it knows what it stands for. Purpose also strengthens commitment. People often give up not because the goal is too difficult, but because their reason for pursuing it is unclear or weak. When purpose is clear, commitment becomes natural. The mind gains the ability to persevere through discomfort because the discomfort has meaning. Purpose turns temporary difficulty into a necessary step rather than a discouraging barrier. This is why people with a sense of purpose often achieve more, not because they face fewer challenges, but because their internal reason to continue outweighs any external reason to quit. In addition, purpose enhances emotional resilience. When people do not know their purpose, small problems feel heavy and overwhelming. They take setbacks personally and allow emotions to dictate their direction. But when the mind is anchored in purpose, emotions are interpreted differently. Frustration, disappointment, and fear become signals to adjust the approach, not reasons to stop. The mind begins to understand that purpose provides stability even when circumstances feel chaotic. This emotional grounding helps individuals maintain perspective during stressful times. Purpose also brings coherence between thoughts, actions, and values. A mind aligned with purpose experiences less internal conflict because it has a consistent framework for making decisions. This coherence creates inner peace and reduces the mental fatigue that comes from constantly shifting directions or second-guessing oneself. Educating the mind to operate within a purpose-driven framework simplifies complex situations by offering a clear lens through which decisions can be evaluated. When actions align with purpose, the mind experiences greater confidence and less doubt. Additionally, purpose influences the people and environments the mind chooses to engage with. When a person knows their purpose, they become more selective about relationships, opportunities, and influences. The mind recognizes that certain environments support growth while others drain energy. This awareness encourages healthier boundaries and leads to more intentional choices. In this way, purpose not only shapes internal thinking, but also external experiences. Purpose also fuels continuous learning. A mind with a meaningful direction becomes naturally curious about how to grow, improve, and expand its abilities. It seeks knowledge not for the sake of accumulation, but for the sake of contribution. Purpose transforms education into empowerment. The desire to fulfill a purpose motivates the mind to grow beyond comfort zones and refine its skills. This ongoing learning strengthens adaptability, creativity, and strategic thinking. Ultimately, purpose transforms the mind from a passive observer of life into an active creator of its path. When the mind is trained to understand and align with purpose, challenges lose their ability to break it, distractions lose their power to mislead it, and setbacks become part of a meaningful journey. Purpose does not eliminate obstacles, but it gives the mind a reason strong enough to rise above them. Perspective is one of the most transformative elements of mental strength. It determines how the mind interprets experiences, assigns meaning to challenges, and chooses what to focus on. Two individuals can experience the same event yet walk away with completely different emotional outcomes, not because the event was different, but because their perspectives were. Educating the mind to shift perspectives intentionally is a powerful way to build resilience, helping individuals navigate adversity with clarity and stability. A resilient perspective begins with the understanding that challenges are not solely barriers, they are also opportunities for development. When the mind views difficulties as personal attacks or signs of inadequacy, it becomes discouraged and defensive. But when it begins to see challenges as catalysts for growth, the mind becomes open rather than resistant. This shift is not about pretending that hardships are pleasant. Rather, it is about training the mind to recognize the value hidden within them. A perspective rooted in growth allows individuals to extract lessons from every struggle, turning setbacks into sources of strength. Reframing is at the core of resilience. Reframing means looking at the same situation through a different lens, one that reveals possibilities rather than limitations. For example, instead of interpreting a failure as proof of weakness, the mind can reframe it as evidence of effort and a guide for what needs improvement. Instead of seeing uncertainty as threatening, it can be seen as a space for creativity and new ideas. Reframing does not change the reality of the situation. It changes the interpretation of that reality. This mental skill reduces emotional distress and empowers individuals to move forward with purpose. Another component of perspective is the ability to zoom out. When people face challenges, they often become consumed by the moment, unable to see beyond immediate discomfort. Educating the mind to step back and view the situation in the context of a larger timeline creates emotional balance. A difficult week, when viewed in isolation, feels overwhelming, but when placed within the broader journey of a year or a lifetime, its weight becomes more manageable. Zooming out helps the mind recognize that temporary difficulties rarely define long-term success. This broader perspective cultivates patience and prevents impulsive decisions driven by stress. Perspective also plays a critical role in how individuals interpret control. People often experience stress when they try to control outcomes that are not fully in their power. Educating the mind to distinguish between what can be controlled and what cannot is an essential part of resilience. When the mind focuses its energy on actions, choices, and behaviors, the aspects within one's influence, it becomes more stable and effective. When it releases the need to control external circumstances, it gains emotional freedom. This shift prevents frustration, reduces anxiety, and fosters a proactive approach to challenges. Gratitude is another perspective that strengthens resilience. While gratitude is often misunderstood as ignoring problems or forcing positivity, its true power lies in balancing the mind's attention. Humans naturally focus more on what is missing, difficult, or uncertain. Gratitude trains the mind to also notice what is stable, supportive, and meaningful. This balanced perspective reduces the emotional intensity of difficult moments. It helps individuals recognize that even in hardship, there are resources, strengths, and connections that support them. Gratitude nurtures hope, which is an essential ingredient of resilience. Educating the mind to adopt a resilient perspective also involves understanding that setbacks are not personal failures, they are universal experiences. Many people internalize challenges as reflections of their identity. When something goes wrong, they assume it means they are inadequate or incapable. But a resilient perspective recognizes that difficulties are a natural part of human growth, not a personal flaw. This understanding reduces self-blame and encourages self-compassion. When individuals treat themselves with compassion, they recover from challenges more quickly and approach future problems with greater confidence. Another aspect of perspective is recognizing the value of temporary discomfort. Growth often requires effort, uncertainty, and sometimes pain. A mind that expects comfort at all times becomes fragile, easily discouraged by even minor difficulties, but a mind educated to understand the role of discomfort becomes stronger. It recognizes that discomfort is often a sign of progress, evidence that one is stretching beyond old limits. This perspective helps individuals tolerate discomfort without feeling threatened by it. Perspective also shapes emotional interpretation. When the mind interprets stress, fear, or frustration as signs of danger, the body responds with resistance. But when these emotions are seen as natural signals, indicating that something matters or needs adjustment, the emotional response becomes more manageable. Educating the mind to understand emotions as information rather than threats enhances resilience by reducing fear-based reactions. A resilient perspective includes hope. Hope is not naive optimism, it is the belief that movement is possible even when progress is slow. It is the mental posture that says, "This is difficult, but it is not the end." Hope fuels effort, encourages problem solving, and gives individuals the psychological endurance to continue. When the mind is trained to maintain hope during adversity, it becomes far more capable of overcoming anything. Perspective is the lens through which resilience is built. When educated intentionally, it becomes a powerful tool that helps individuals navigate challenges with strength, clarity, and determination. Discipline is often misunderstood as restriction or punishment, but in reality, it is a form of self-respect. It is the act of choosing what is beneficial over what is convenient again and again until progress becomes inevitable. When discipline is practiced consistently, it shapes the mind into a powerful instrument capable of overcoming challenges with stability and confidence. This inner power does not emerge from grand gestures, but from small, repeated actions that train the mind to stay committed regardless of emotional fluctuations. Consistent discipline begins with routine. The mind thrives on structure because structure creates predictability, and predictability reduces mental noise. When habits are established, whether in the form of daily learning, physical activity, or intentional reflection, the mind becomes anchored. This anchoring prevents chaos from dictating behavior. Instead of reacting impulsively to stress or uncertainty, a disciplined mind relies on established patterns that keep it grounded. These routines serve as a foundation, allowing the mind to function with greater clarity and focus even during difficult times. Discipline also builds mental endurance. Just as physical muscles grow through repeated effort, mental strength develops through consistent practice. Each time the mind resists distraction, follows through on a task, or honors a commitment, it becomes more resilient. Over time, the mind learns that it can endure discomfort without giving in. This endurance is essential for overcoming obstacles because challenges rarely disappear quickly. They require persistence, and persistence is sustained through discipline. A disciplined mind does not rely solely on motivation, because motivation fluctuates. Instead, it depends on the habit of showing up, even when the desire to do so is low. Another important aspect of discipline is learning to manage impulses. Humans naturally gravitate toward ease, pleasure, and immediate rewards, but growth requires long-term thinking. When discipline is practiced consistently, the mind develops the ability to pause before acting. This pause creates space for intentional decision-making. Instead of choosing the option that feels good now, the disciplined mind asks which choice aligns with long-term goals and values. This habit of intentional decision-making builds inner power by strengthening self-control. The ability to regulate impulses becomes a protective shield against distractions, procrastination, and self-sabotage. Discipline also sharpens focus. In a world filled with constant notifications and competing demands, the ability to concentrate has become a rare skill. Consistent discipline trains the mind to narrow its attention, prioritizing what truly matters while ignoring unnecessary noise. With practice, the mind becomes more efficient. It wastes less time, retains more information, and completes tasks with greater effectiveness. This improved focus not only enhances productivity, but also strengthens confidence. When the mind sees evidence of its own capability, it becomes more willing to take on challenges. Another key element of discipline is accountability. When individuals hold themselves accountable for their actions and outcomes, the mind begins to operate with heightened responsibility. Accountability teaches the mind that progress is not accidental. It is created through consistent effort. This perspective reduces the tendency to blame circumstances or external forces. Instead, the disciplined mind acknowledges its role in shaping results. This sense of ownership fuels motivation, enhances problem solving, and encourages a proactive approach to challenges. Discipline also builds trust in oneself. Every time a person makes a promise to themselves and follows through, they strengthen their inner credibility. Over time, the mind learns that it can depend on itself. This self-trust is a powerful form of inner strength because it removes doubt and hesitation. When individuals believe in their ability to stay consistent, they approach challenges with courage rather than fear. They no longer question whether they can handle a situation. They simply apply the discipline that they have practiced repeatedly. Additionally, consistent discipline supports emotional regulation. Many emotional reactions, frustration, impatience, discouragement, can be minimized when the mind is accustomed to structure and persistence. Discipline teaches the mind to stay steady even when emotions fluctuate. For example, on days when motivation is low or stress is high, discipline keeps the mind from abandoning its commitments. This stability reduces emotional volatility and reinforces a sense of control. As emotional regulation strengthens, inner power grows because challenges no longer have the ability to derail progress. Discipline is also closely connected to identity. When individuals consistently follow habits that align with their goals, their identity shifts to reflect those actions. They begin to see themselves as capable, responsible, and determined. This identity reinforces future behavior, creating a cycle of growth. The disciplined mind no longer acts out of obligation. It acts out of identity. Actions become natural because they match the mindset of someone who values progress, resilience, and purpose. Discipline creates momentum. Progress may start slowly, but each small step builds upon the last. Over time, consistent discipline produces visible results, improved skills, better habits, stronger confidence, and clearer thinking. These results reinforce the belief that effort leads to growth, motivating the mind to continue. Momentum becomes a source of inner power because it proves that small, consistent actions can transform even the most challenging situations. Through consistency, structure, and intentional choices, discipline becomes a powerful driver of inner strength. It shapes the mind into an ally rather than an obstacle, enabling individuals to rise above challenges with clarity, stability, and unwavering commitment.